So the 21st of March today marks Human Rights Day in South Africa. And for this discussion, our focus is on the right to electricity. This week, the UDM, NUMSA and several other organizations have gone to court to declare load shedding unconstitutional. Let's bring in Postdoctoral Fellow at the College of Law at Unisa, Dr. Felix Dube, for more on this discussion. Felix, it's great to see you. Thanks very much indeed for coming on. What does the law say about our right to electricity?
Good morning, Michelle and the viewers. So for us to determine whether South Africans have a right to electricity, we have to go to the definition of human rights and ask ourselves whether electricity is one of those fundamental entitlements or freedoms that are inherent to all human beings. Can it lawfully be taken away? And in this case, our source will be the Constitution. Does the Constitution provide the right to electricity? In Chapter 2 of the Constitution, which deals with the Bill of Rights, we've got several rights, civil and political rights, as well as socio-economic and cultural rights. But nowhere in the Bill of Rights or anywhere in the Constitution do we see any explicit or an express constitutional provision that says there is a right to electricity. But that is not the end of the matter. The courts have told us in several cases that certain rights, which are not stated in the text of the Constitution or in legislation, can be inferred from other rights because human rights are interconnected and they are interdependent. And the courts have told us in one case that although not stated in the Constitution, the right to electricity can be inferred from a cluster of rights, which includes the right to adequate housing, right to clean water, and access to health care. This is because in a modern society, it is impossible to live a dignified life without access to electricity, whether that electricity comes from the national grid or whether one generates it themselves. We have computers that need to be charged, phones that need to be charged, televisions to watch, internet routers to power, and other communication devices that must be charged, including security cameras. So even watches these days now need charging, and soon we're going to have electric cars coming into the market, and they will need to be charged. So electricity is no longer negotiable. It is necessary for our communication, it is necessary for our transport, and it is necessary for our security. It is necessary for our water and to provide for energy for everything that we do. So it has now really become part of a fundamental part of our lives that elevates it to the status of a human right.
So it's not like once this case gets to court that it'll just be dismissed on the basis that there's nothing in the Constitution that explicitly outlines a right to electricity. This is obviously the route that lawyers for the likes of the UDM, NUMSA and other organizations will be arguing.
There has been a recent case involving Eskoms, several municipalities, and the VAL Association. And in that case, the Constitutional Court was skeptical in using the language of a right to electricity. And I think that's because it had not been explicitly argued. So in this case, I think we are going to see a proper engagement with that right to electricity. And if I was a judge, I will actually recognize that right because it is now so indispensable in our life that you can't really do anything without electricity. Everything comes to a stop. So I would say that there should be no doubt as to the right to electricity. And even if that argument were to be seen to be untenable, there are still other angles through which this case can be won. Because electricity, as just I've said, is responsible for everything that we do, from your security, from your fuel supply, from your water, education, communication. Everything now depends on electricity. So there is really a government duty there, and there has been a violation in my view.
I wonder what Eskom will have to say about that, Dr. Dube, given its own constraints, in as far as what Eskom has outlined to us as consumers about its inability. And according to Eskom, there are several factors out of its control insofar as providing a stable, reliable form of energy, that there is no load shedding, that there are no power cuts. That will surely be something that the court must take into consideration.
Yes, definitely. And when we speak about Eskom, we really have to ask ourselves, why is Eskom unable to supply us with a consistent and uninterrupted supply of electricity? It is not because they do not have the energy to power these coal power stations. Instead, they are actually closing them down. There is a very long schedule as to which power station is to be closed on which day. And the drive seems to be that we need to get rid of this dirty coal because it is too bad for our environment, and that instead this coal can be used better by being exported to the Asian and European markets. And I think that is a problem. That is really a problem. And if you really look closer into it and you listen to what the former CEO of Eskoms has said, Andrew, you then begin to see that there is politics in this mix. And that in order to fix Eskoms, in order to make Eskoms be in a position to provide consistent supply of electricity, you have to put the politics in the right track. I'll give you an example. Recently, I think for the past 4 or so days, I haven't experienced load shedding. That is because a political party decided to protest it and shut down the country. And all of a sudden, we all had an interrupted supply of electricity. I was shocked. So we really have to look closer and see that there are attempts to take this energy generation from Eskom and give it to the private sector through independent power producers. And then what we have there is that a lot of money, billions of American dollars in debt, have been secured in order to provide financing to these independent power producers to produce electricity, and that instead the Eskom power stations must be shut down. It is only recently that we heard that there are people in government who actually want Eskom to have a role in the generation of green energy. So at the end of the day, I believe that Eskom is not facing a financial issue, even though they tell that it's got a lot of debt. The issue is the politics behind it. There are people who are going to eat out of this.
Are there examples, Dr. Dube, of previous unsuccessful legal cases against Eskom around power cuts?
Yes, there are several cases, and if you look them down, you actually begin to see that there is a thread that runs through these cases, although there are some discrepancies. Eskom has been taken to court to compel it to stop cutting off power to municipalities that have not been paying it. And one of those municipalities has been the Emfuleni municipality. After some victories, after some initial setbacks, I think Eskom was able to then secure a court order to allow it to attach the assets of the municipality. And then the second case, which was decided by the Constitutional Court late last year, I think it involved Eskom and the Vaal River Development Association and several municipalities, in which Eskom lost its bid to cut off power to those municipalities that were not paying it. Eskom had argued that it is unable to provide power because these municipalities are owing it so much such that it is affecting its balance sheet, it is affecting its cash flow, and it can't do things because it is being owed money. But then the court said no. There are so many things that have come into play. Eskom is an organ of state. It can not stand in the way of other organs of state in providing essential goods and services, and in this case, electricity. These and other cases show us that there is sort of like a mix of judicial opinion on this, although the dominant view seems to be that Eskom is not entitled to cut off power to municipalities that are failing to pay it.
Mm-hmm. Given everything you've said, Dr. Dube, and just to take us back to the point of our conversation, this application by the UDM, NUMSA, and various other organizations wanting load shedding declared unconstitutional, is this a case where the court can actually end load shedding effectively?
I would be very skeptical about using the judiciary to resolve operational challenges that are affecting the state. Because at the end of the day, judges are just human beings like us. They make their own mistakes, and sometimes I think that there is an overestimation of the true power of the judiciary. As I have said, I believe that it is the politics that can fix this load shedding situation. It is not the cause. Of course, there are people who would want to govern the country through litigation, through the courts, but I don't think that is the right way to go. But to go back to your question, I think that for us to speculate with any degree of certainty as to the outcome of that case before the High Court, we have to ask ourselves if previous court orders for the government to do something have actually yielded any positive results. Especially looking at that, the courts do not have the army, they don't have the police to actually enforce their orders. And in this case, in this regard, two cases come into mind. The first one involved the Ateni Kutie in Mpumalanga, and then the other one involved the Makana municipality, which was pushed by the Unemployed People's Movement in the Eastern Cape. In both cases, these residents had asked the court to compel the provincial and national governments to intervene in those failing municipalities so that those municipalities can provide water, they can provide electricity, they can collect refuse and other waste. And the court granted those orders. But what happened to those municipalities? Nothing changed because the politicians kept on playing hide and seek. So I would say that if you want to resolve this situation of load shedding, the answer does not lie in the judiciary. It lies in the politics. And Professor Charles Frombato of UP tells us in one of his writings that the people elect a government that they want, and that they will get a government that they deserve. And then we also have George Orwell telling us that people who elected incompetent politicians, they are actually not victims of bad governance. They are accomplices. So as a nation, we have to look at ourselves and say, have we elected the people who will serve our interests? Is this really what we want? Because elections come on, they come time and again, and people vote the same persons, and then they cry and say there's no electricity. So I don't understand how then there can be change if we still have the same people and the same systems in place. So you need a change of mindset in that regard.
Dr. Felix Dube, very interesting discussion indeed. Thanks so much for weighing in. Dr. Dube is a postdoctoral fellow at the College of Law at Unisa.